Reddit's real-life nightmares delves into spine-tingling true tales sourced directly from Reddit's most chilling threads. Encounter encounters with the supernatural and brushes with mortal danger as ordinary individuals share their harrowing experiences with the inexplicable and the macabre. Led by Read It, prepare to be gripped by fear as we journey into the heart of darkness. Subscribe now to confront the chilling truths hidden within Reddit's darkest corners.
Gatos 42. I'm sure this is supposed to be more along the lines of ghost stuff, but I'm going to tell you about the most scared I've ever been in my life. Last year a friend of mine passed away, we'll call him Charlie. I'm in the army and he had taken some frag to the leg in Iraq, but he pulled through so it came out of nowhere. His death was a bit of a personal matter, but all you guys need to know is that my other friend, who I'll call Bill, took it very hard. This guy Bill has been my best friend in the military. He's that guy who everyone wants to hang around, a perfect blend of friendliness and confidence. He knows what is important, what isn't, and most of all he truly cares for people. Everyone who reads this will know the type of person I'm talking about. Anyhow, he's my best friend I've ever had, bar none. So a week or so later, Charlie's family fly out to the nearby town, and we all decide to have a bit of a memorial. I'm not yet 21 at this point, so I get to play the DD. My buddy Bill is hitting the bottle hard, doing shots with everyone, downing pitchers left and right. As the night goes on he seems to get more and more serious until about 1 a.m. Bill walks up to me and says, "Hey, come outside with me while I smoke." We both go out. He sits on a concrete block out in the parking lot and stares at the ground for a while. Then he says the scariest thing I've ever heard someone say. "Gatos, after I go home tonight, I'm going to kill myself." Naturally I start to freak out and start to try and talk him down. I end up in tears. He's telling me how he hates himself. I hit him in the face. He starts to break down a bit. Stuff started to go a little crazy. My squad leader ended up walking up to us, and that is the only time I have ever told him to fuck off and leave me alone. I won't leave you guys with some cliffhanger. Long story short, a few other friends come over and talk to him. After he's had a good talk and gotten some feelings out, I throw him in my car. Mind you, I'm still terrified at this point. We get back to the barracks. I walk him back up to his room and push him in the closet. I close the door and sleep against it the entire night. The next morning he ends up asking me why he was sleeping in the closet. I told him the story, and that he was not drinking for a very long fucking, emphasis on the fucking, time. So kiddies, that's my story about fear. It's not your life you end up fearing for the most, it's the lives of those you love. TLDR, fuck you, I just poured my heart out. Faux pas 09. When I was 17 to 18 we lived in a little village called Shipton Bellinger in Hampshire, England. There's two towns fairly close that almost form an oval. I've always had trouble sleeping and was getting really into fitness then, so I started going out fairly regularly at 12/1 am and running, taking that oval route. It was a couple of miles run and tired me out nicely. So one night I'm coming to the end of the circuit. I'd gone via Tidworth and back up towards Lugershall. I know some of you are Google mapping this. There's a secondary school called Castle Down which is near a back road which leads towards my village again, totally unlit with trees on either side and then big open fields. So I'm under a street lamp outside the school tightening my laces when there is a ton of noise from the woods. I figure it's just a deer or something. So I finish tying up and start to jog down the road, the noise is getting louder and louder. It gets to the point where something is audibly coming towards me through the woods and I hear the metal fence shake as something starts to climb it. Nope. I took off so fucking fast down that road, like full on sprinting the entire mile or so, constantly repeating to myself, if it can catch me it deserves me, and, don't waste time looking, you know it's there, just run. Freaked me the fuck out. I got into the village, stopped and had a look for about a minute to see if anything came out of the darkness, then I pegged it to my row and house. Still don't know if it was a person or animal or what. And quite frankly I'm glad I never got to find out. Rushbington. When I was 13 I lived in a small town in rural Zimbabwe. We had a large, single-story house with a massive garden that surrounded the property. On one side of the house, the garden narrowed between our house and the fence of the neighbor's house. At the end of this narrow section was an empty, decrepit cement-lined pond that I had recently cleared of rubble and plant life with the plan of eventually filling it again. One afternoon, my friend Dan and I were messing around in the garden, and for some reason I found myself running down the narrowed section of the garden straight towards the pond. Suddenly, and for some reason that I can't really articulate, dread and fear washed over my body like 1,000 needles raining from the sky. I stopped dead in my tracks about 2 meters from the pond, and found myself breathlessly staring at it, motionless. From the crack on one side of the pond, a long snake, perhaps a meter long, emerged 3 or 4 seconds later. It was a Mozambique spitting cobra, a large, aggressive and extremely venomous snake that wouldn't hesitate to bite or spit at threats, like a 13-year-old boy running past its new home in the wall of the pond, for instance. I slowly backed away and the pond was refilled with sand the next day. To this day I don't know what it was that stopped me dead in my tracks, but if I continued perhaps I wouldn't be here today. Jesus H. Banana. I was molested by my maid when I was a kid. I was at the age of 4 to 6 at the time. I remember having a maid that lived in our house to help my mom because my dad was in Michigan/PA, while we were back in the Philippines. She was a female on a bit of a bigger size. She was really nice to me, never really hurt me or anything and seemed to play favorites towards me. I was really close to her, almost like a second mom. Back to the story. I remember every nap time, she would lay and sleep next to me, and while doing so to make me sleep faster, she would caress and jerk my penis till full hard on and just keep playing and massaging it. I just thought it was normal at the time. It was around middle school/high school when I had a sudden flashback of that incident and I remember the times when it happened. I don't really feel bad towards it, I just think it's creepy and disturbing that this person, whom my entire family trusted, molested me. This is also not a throwaway because most of my friends whom view Reddit knows this story by now. Cornelius_Talmadge. It was 2002 and I was hitchhiking around the US. I was on my way to a rainbow gathering in the Mark Twain National Forest just outside of Ironton, Missouri. It was about 11 p.m. when we made it to the state road that led into the forest. It was too dark to see the discreet stacked stone cairns that led us to the seed camp location, so we decided to pull it over on the side of the road and wait till morning. All night, we heard what sounded like children playing. Lots of kids. Like an entire playground's worth. Except we were miles from the nearest public road, out in the middle of BLM land, and the noises continued on throughout the entire night. Next morning we found the seed camp location and settled in. At the height of the gathering there was maybe 150 people there, but in the seed camp stage there was maybe a dozen or so of us who got there early to set up the site. A few of us went wandering around in the hills looking for firewood and perhaps a fresh spring to get water from. We came across an old foundation for a house out in the middle of the woods. The house that stood on it must have been gone for quite some time because there were decent-sized trees growing where it once stood. There were a few pieces of rotted-out boards scattered about, and some rusted nails and other metal bits that must have served some integral function for the home. We figured there might be some cool old junk lying around so we looked closer. We found a kid's shoe, half rotted into the forest floor. Then we found another. And another. And another. And then we found half-decayed garbage bags full of them. Hundreds of kids' shoes, of all styles, from old-timey dress shoes to those jelly shoes from the 80s. Some looked relatively new, some looked like they'd been out there for decades. Scattered within a 25-foot radius of this old foundation. Oddly enough, there wasn't any other stuff out there. No old refrigerator, or maybe some junk appliance or tools or whatnot. Just kids' shoes. Deleted user. My friend knew a woman by some loose extension who had a really horrific experience, but didn't know it till weeks later. I think she was a friend of his uncle's, who he was really close to. She was a hiker/camper, and general outdoors enthusiast. From what I can gather, she was a really independent woman, very knowledgeable about survival and wildlife, and would often go on camping retreats on her own, bringing only her supplies and a camera with her. Anyway, she decides to embark on her biggest hike or camping retreat or what have you, yet. I don't recall exactly where it was, but if I were to guess, I'd say it was the Andes Mountains. So she goes on the camping trip for about 2 weeks, does everything she wants to do, and more or less has a great, fulfilling experience. She leaves the trip unharmed, with nothing out of the ordinary occurring to her knowledge. Some time later, she gets the pictures she took of the trip developed, and upon going through them, she finds several pictures of herself, sleeping in her tent. Deleted user. This happened my senior year of college, Christmas break 2006. I worked for a professor that asked me to house/dog sit for him while he was out of town to see the bowl game that we were in. He was gone for 3 days and had a huge piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I invited my GF at the time. He had horses and fishing and a gator to ride around on, etc. etc. So the first 2 nights went down with no incident, but the last night, his little foofy dog is having a fit. She keeps barking at the back door. At first we blow it off, but decide to lock the dog inside in case of a coyote or something. After a while we start to get a little creeped out. I keep saying it's probably an animal and we'll be fine. My GF, not too bright, wants to go investigate to see what's outside, so I lock the door behind her. Hee, just kidding. She goes outside and says she saw something small and gray, probably a coyote, and it ran off. So, just an animal, no worries. But by this time, we're pretty spooked. The dog now starts barking at the window on the other side of the house. We're still trying to ignore it, but a little worried. We decide to get into bed, awkward silence, then I hear it. It sounds like a young girl singing a soft, eerie lullaby. I don't say anything, hoping that my mind is playing tricks on me. My GF says, "Let's get the fuck out of here." I say, "Why?" She says, "You didn't hear that little girl singing." Okay, let's get the fuck out, and we got the fuck out. I even called someone to talk to me while we walked out to my car. Next morning, went to clean up the house and such. Most scared I've ever been. Ever. Throw that shit out. 12. Throw away because I've never told anyone. When I was 14, my brother moved out of my mom's house to start college, leaving me the entire top floor. I had been living in the top floor alone for about a month before I first started hearing weird sounds coming from the hallway/bathroom area outside of my bedroom. Every day at some time in the day I would hear footsteps going away from my bedroom or a door suddenly rock in its hinges like it does when someone shuts another door and the air pressure changes. Normally I could only hear the footsteps from outside of the hallway, but some nights I could hear footsteps moving right past me in the hallway. It continued like that for a long time. I spent weeks where I'd investigate every sound and wait in the halls late at night for the footsteps to come by, then I'd spend weeks ignoring it and blowing it off as a creaky house. In November that year, I think I saw what was making the sound. I was falling asleep with my head turned toward the shut door to the hallway. My computer desk was right next to the door. I could see a blue light next to the power button. I nodded off for a bit, but in a daze I noticed that the blue light was flickering like something was in front of it, and I focused my eyes on a silhouetted man standing between me and the hallway door, looking at my computer desk. I instantly woke the fuck up. I was staring at an intruder and trying to figure out what the fuck. I concluded that I'd just roll out of bed as quietly as possible and make a run for the door. He left it open when he came in. Before I go any further, I swear this is true. I know how crazy it sounds. So I attempt to execute my genius runaway plan, but the exact moment I shifted my waist to slide out of bed, the man turned around and looked straight at me. He didn't have a face. It was hard to tell at first, but now that we were looking right at each other, I could see he was like a shadowy void from head to toe. I sat up as fast as I could, but sooner than I could make it up he was at the edge of my bed. I rolled backward onto my bed and felt drugged, like I had suddenly been injected with anesthesia or something. I couldn't speak. I was trying to scream for my mom or stepdad, but every time I tried all I got were squeaks. I was still staring right at the intruder. He reached out a hand and covered my eyes. I blinked, and he was gone. I could speak and move as normal now, and I jumped out of bed. Nobody was in the room, but the door was still open. I remember shutting the door, and I remember seeing the door shut before I fell asleep, but the door was open when I got up. I have thought about this experience a whole lot since it happened, and the door is the only thing I can't explain away. I stay away from the dark now. Shivers. When I was out on the lam 8-ish years ago, ran away from bad foster home, I pretty much stuck to walking and drifting around. I did what I could to work. Keep a bit of food and throw people some cash to let me sleep on their property. This occasion, I found a side job in town. I was happy about it, but the 8-mile walk into town really irked me. Walking. I see an old pickup truck pass by with 2 men inside. Immediately, they bust a U-turn and slam the truck into park on the roadside. They began cat-calling, saying vulgar things. I just kept looking forward, using my ears to calculate their footsteps. Suddenly it got quiet, and I picked up my pace. Out of the corner of my eye, I see they're trying to flank me. Now, I'm hauling ass, thank goodness for soccer. As I'm running, I hear their truck start up. As I approach the line of town, I see a pediatrics office. I see a couple with their baby, walking to their car. I run to them, telling them, please, help. These men, points to truck circling parking lot, have been following me. I hope you understand. I'm not crazy. I hope you're not crazy. Please, can I get a ride? They looked freaked, but they allowed me a ride. Lucky, they also made a call to the cops as they dropped me off into town. Little did those people know, I was a wanted runaway. Needless to say, this wasn't the first time I eluded pedos or rapists. Ladies, be aware of your surroundings. Know your strengths. Learn to think on your feet.